He thought she was running from an abusive boyfriend. Turns out she was running from a congressional investigation that could send her to prison for 10 years. This is the story of one lie that spiraled into something neither of them could control. And before you judge what happens next, ask yourself, what would you do if the person you love turned out to be someone completely different? October 17th, Grayson Wells was 3 whiskeys deep when he heard the pounding on his door. Not knocking, pounding. The kind that means someone's either dying or being chased. He'd moved to this cabin in Maplewood after his teaching contract wasn't renewed. That's the polite way of saying he got fired. A parent complained that he assigned a book with mature themes to his AP literature class. The school board chose the angry parent over 10 years of teaching awards. So here he was, 43 years old, living on savings that wouldn't last another 6 months, wondering what the hell he was supposed to do with the rest of his life. The woman on his porch was bleeding. Not a lot, but enough. Her left eyebrow had a cut that was still fresh, and her knuckles were scraped raw. "I need help," she said. No introduction. No apology for the late hour. Just those 3 words. Grayson's first thought was domestic violence. His second thought was that he should call the police. His third thought was that she looked terrified of that exact suggestion. "Come in," he said. She stumbled inside and he noticed she was limping. Her jeans were torn at the knee, and there was mud caked on her boots like she'd been running through the woods. "Are you hurt? Do you need a hospital?" "No hospital." Her voice was firm despite the shaking. "No police, please. I just need somewhere to stay for a few hours until morning." Red flags everywhere. Grayson knew he should make the call anyway, for her safety, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the look in her eyes. Not fear of someone else, fear of the system itself. "I'm Thea," she said. He later found out that was her first lie. "Grayson, sit down. Let me clean those cuts." While he got the first aid kit, she stood by the window, watching the road like she expected someone to pull up any second. He noticed she was wearing expensive boots. Not hiking boots, fashion boots, the kind that cost more than his monthly mortgage. "You want to tell me what happened?" he asked, dabbing antiseptic on her eyebrow. She winced but didn't pull away. "Car accident. I swerved to avoid a deer and went into a ditch. I tried to climb out and slipped. Hit my head on a rock." Lie number 2, though he didn't know it yet. "Where's your car?" "About 2 miles back. It's totaled. My phone died. I saw your lights." She was good. Everything sounded plausible. Rehearsed but plausible. What Grayson didn't know, there was no car. Seraphina Castellane, CEO of Castellane Industries and worth $6.4 billion, had been dropped off by a driver 3 miles away. She'd walked through the woods deliberately. The cuts and mud were real but self-inflicted. She needed to disappear for 72 hours while her legal team handled a situation that would either save her company or destroy everything she'd built. The congressional hearing was scheduled for Monday. Insider trading allegations. If the SEC found what they were looking for, she was looking at prison time. Not white-collar resort prison. Real prison. Her lawyers told her to stay visible, stay calm, issue statements. Instead, she ran, because that's what Seraphina did when walls closed in. She'd been doing it since she was 17. They sat in Grayson's living room. He made coffee instead of offering his couch, because he still wasn't entirely sure this woman wasn't dangerous or being followed by someone who was. "You should really file a police report," he said. "For insurance purposes, if nothing else. I'll handle it tomorrow." She wrapped her hands around the mug. No wedding ring. No jewelry at all, actually, which struck him as odd given those boots. "Can I ask you something?" "Do you always let bleeding strangers into your house at midnight?" "Only on Thursdays." She smiled. Small but genuine. "What do you do out here?" "This is pretty isolated. Used to be a teacher. Now I'm between opportunities." He hated that phrase, but it sounded better than unemployed and running out of money. Used to be? Made the mistake of thinking teenagers could handle. Reading books about real things. Turns out parents prefer their kids learn about life from TikTok. She laughed and it surprised both of them. "I read Beloved in high school. Changed my entire perspective on American history. My teacher got complaints too. She told them to deal with it." "Yeah, well, my principal didn't have her spine." They talked until 4 a.m. She asked questions about teaching, about the town, about why he chose this place. He found himself talking about things he hadn't said out loud in months. How betrayed he felt. How he'd dedicated a decade to those kids and got discarded over one complaint. How he was too old to start over but too young to give up. She listened like she actually cared. Not the polite nodding people do when they're waiting for their turn to talk. Real listening. "Can I tell you something?" she said as the sky started getting lighter. "Sometimes the thing you think destroyed you is actually the thing that freed you. You might not see it now, but maybe losing that job saved you from wasting another 10 years somewhere you weren't valued." He wanted to believe that. He really did. When morning came, she called someone. The conversation was brief and quiet, but Grayson heard her say, "Yes, I'm safe, and no, don't come here. I'll meet you in town." "I should go," she said, hanging up. "Thank you for not calling the police. For just letting me sit here. You never told me who you were running from." She looked at him for a long moment. "Myself, mostly." Then she left. No business card. No last name, just gone. Grayson figured that was the end of it. A strange night. A mysterious woman. Life would go back to normal, which meant sending out resumes and getting rejection emails. 3 days later, his entire world shifted. He was watching the news when her face appeared on screen. But they weren't calling her Thea. They were calling her Seraphina Castellane, CEO Billionaire, currently under investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission for allegedly using insider information to dump stock before a major company announcement that tanked share prices. The woman who'd sat on his couch was now on CNN, walking into a congressional hearing in a designer suit, surrounded by lawyers. Grayson felt like he'd been hit by a truck. She'd lied. About everything, her name, the car accident, all of it. She'd used him as a hideout. He should have been angry. He was angry. But he was also confused because the woman he'd talked to that night didn't seem like someone capable of securities fraud. Then again, what did he know? He'd spent 3 hours with her. 2 weeks later, she showed up again. This time she knocked normally. It was early evening and Grayson almost didn't answer because he assumed it was someone trying to sell him solar panels. But when he opened the door, there she was. Seraphina Castellane. No cuts this time, no mud. Just exhaustion carved into every line of her face. "I know you probably hate me," she said before he could speak. "I lied to you. I used you. But I need to explain. You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do. Can I come in?" "5 minutes. Then I'll leave and never bother you again." Against his better judgment, he let her in. She sat on the same spot on his couch. "The night I came here, I was supposed to be preparing for a congressional hearing. Insider trading allegations. Someone on my executive team leaked information to the SEC claiming I'd sold stocks based on information I shouldn't have had. The thing is, I didn't do it. But proving I didn't do it meant going through emails, depositions, interrogations. I panicked. I ran. I told my assistant to drop me off in the middle of nowhere because I needed to think without lawyers and board members and journalists shoving cameras in my face. So you lied to a complete stranger instead." "Yes, and I'm sorry. I thought I'd stay one night, clear my head, and leave. I didn't expect to actually like you. I didn't expect to have the first honest conversation I'd had in years." Grayson leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Honest? You lied about your name?" "I lied about my name. I didn't lie about anything else. That stuff about my teacher, about reading Beloved, that was real. The way I felt talking to you, that was real. Why are you here, Seraphina?" "Because the hearing's over. They couldn't prove anything because I didn't do anything. My CFO was the one leaking information and tried to frame me for it. He's been arrested. My company's stock is recovering. I should be celebrating, but all I can think about is that night here. How quiet it was. How I didn't have to perform or strategize or watch every word. I just got to be a person." She stood up, walked toward the door. "I don't expect you to forgive me for lying. I just wanted you to know the truth, and to say thank you. That night might have saved my sanity." "Wait," Grayson said. "Did you actually hit your head on a rock, or was that fake too?" She touched her eyebrow where the cut had been. "I walked into a tree branch on purpose. Needed it to look convincing. That's insane." "I know." And then inexplicably Grayson laughed. The whole thing was so absurd. A billionaire CEO walking into trees to create fake injuries, so she could hide in his cabin during a federal investigation. "You want some coffee?" he asked. She looked surprised. "Really? I mean, if you're going to use me as your panic room, might as well get to know the real you." That's how it started. Not a romance. A friendship built on the weirdest foundation imaginable. She came back the next weekend. Then the weekend after that. She'd drive herself, no security, no assistant. Just her in a rental car, showing up at his door like a normal person visiting a friend. They'd cook dinner. Terrible meals neither of them knew how to make properly. They'd watch old movies. She told him about growing up poor in Detroit, about starting her first company at 22 in a basement apartment, about the loneliness of being the youngest woman to ever hit the Forbes billionaire list. He told her about his marriage that fell apart 6 years ago because his ex-wife wanted kids and he didn't, about his parents, who were still alive but hadn't spoken to him in 3 years because he'd chosen teaching over joining his father's law firm, about the fear that he'd wasted his entire life on a career that didn't want him anymore. Somewhere in those conversations, friendship became something else. Neither of them meant for it to happen. But it did. The first time he kissed her. They were arguing about whether Die Hard was a Christmas movie. She said yes. He said absolutely not. She called him a contrarian. He called her pretentious. And then they were kissing and it felt like falling and flying at the same time. "This is a terrible idea," she said afterward. "The worst," he agreed. They did it anyway. For 6 months it worked. She'd come to Maplewood on weekends. He'd go to Chicago when he could. They kept it quiet not because they were ashamed, but because the second it went public, everything would change. Then the reporter found out. A journalist from Bloomberg had been digging into Seraphina's personal life, looking for anything scandalous post-investigation. They found Grayson. The story hit. Billionaire CEO dating unemployed ex-teacher lover liability. The article painted him as a gold digger, mentioned his firing, speculated he was using her for money, found his ex-wife, who gave a quote about how he never had ambition. The comments section was brutal. Seraphina's board called an emergency meeting. Investors were nervous. The stock dipped 2% on the news, which doesn't sound like much until you realize that's billions of dollars. She came to his cabin on a Wednesday night, which never happened. He knew it was bad. "They want me to end it," she said. Not asking, telling. "They're saying you're a distraction, that this relationship makes me look unstable, that shareholders are questioning my judgment." Grayson felt numb. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know," and that was the first time he'd ever heard her sound truly lost. "If I choose you, I might lose the company. 15 years of work. Thousands of employees depending on me. But if I choose them, I lose you. And I don't know if I can do that either." "You shouldn't have to choose." "But I do. That's the reality." They sat in silence for a long time. "What if there's another option?" Grayson said finally, "What if we go public? Not hiding, not apologizing, just us together, daring them to do something about it. You don't know what that would mean. The media would destroy you. They're already destroying me. Might as well make it worth it." Seraphina looked at him, really looked at him. "You'd do that? Face all of that, knowing it might not work? I'd do it for you." So they did. They went on 60 Minutes together, told their story, answered the hard questions. She defended him. He defended her. They didn't sugarcoat anything. The board didn't fire her because they couldn't. She owned too much stock. The media storm lasted 3 weeks and then something else became the story. But here's the truth nobody talks about. It almost broke them. The pressure, the constant scrutiny, the fights about whether it was worth it. Seraphina pulling 18-hour days to prove she wasn't distracted. Grayson feeling like a burden. Like maybe everyone was right and he was just dragging her down. They almost called it off 4 times. What saved them wasn't some grand gesture or dramatic moment. It was therapy. Couples counseling with a woman who charged $400 an hour and didn't care that one of them was a billionaire. It was learning how to fight fair, how to communicate, how to build something real instead of something that looked good from the outside. 2 years later, Grayson got a teaching job at a private school that actually valued his approach. Seraphina stayed CEO but restructured her schedule to have actual work-life balance. They bought a house together. Not in Maplewood and not in Chicago, but halfway between. They didn't get married because neither of them needed a piece of paper to prove anything. And on quiet nights, they still sit together and talk about how one midnight knock turned into something neither of them expected, but both of them fought like hell to keep. Watch what happens next.